How are ya?
I'm well. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for being here, for joining our book club discussion. I'll let people trickle in, and some people will be watching the replay of this, and others will be joining live. But thank you so much. The excitement was immense when I announced that you were the featured author this month for our book club.
Well, I am excited to be here. I am always so happy to talk about my favorite book right here, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. So yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So you don't need any introduction, but for anyone who might be joining the live without context, we are so lucky this month for our Wellbeing Book Club to have Nedra Glover Tawwab here to speak about her wonderful book, um, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. She is a licensed clinical social worker, a relationship expert. She owns a group therapy practice, and she's the author of three best-selling books, including our featured book for this month. And I will tell you that both, like I said, so many people emailed me when I announced that your book was being featured, saying I love this book, or I heard about this, or I wanted to read it. And in my own work as a psychologist, I have referenced your work to several of my clients who have then circled back around and said that your book has really changed them and their perspectives and their relationships. So you bring a real gift to everyone around you.
Well, it's always an honor to have psychologists and social workers and therapists and people in the wellness field recommending my book because you never know how it sits with the people in your profession, your colleagues. So I'm always so happy to hear about my colleagues saying like, "I recommend your book." It's like, "Oh my gosh, it must be good. Thank you."
It certainly is. And I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about the book is that you not only model how to set boundaries with yourself and with other people, but you also help people recognize the ways that they might not be respecting other people's boundaries, right? In the book,
Yes.
at least the way I read it, the presumption is not that it's always the other person who isn't
Yes.
respecting boundaries, that you really provoke a lot of thoughtfulness about how it's two-sided, how we have to respect other people's boundaries,
I
and we
know,
also
and that's so hard. I remember when I was in college and I had a friend who did not respond to phone calls
yeah,
quickly. You would call, she wouldn't call you back for days. And I was like, okay, I've never experienced this. Like, what is happening?
yeah,
And she was like, hey, if I'm not at home, I'm doing stuff. So I
yeah,
call people back when I'm like at home, I'm available to talk. I don't talk while I'm driving, I don't talk. She gave me this list of times, and I was like, oh, a boundary for me.
yeah,
It's like, oh, okay. We are still friends. It did not ruin the friendship, but I certainly know that if I call her, she may or may not answer. And I am similar in that,
yeah.
at this point in life. But at the time, it was kind of like, well, if you have a cell phone, you must answer it. And it's like, that's not the case. And I too have to respect someone's boundaries.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think boundaries are being discussed more and more. But
Hmm.
I think boundaries are a term that people use somewhat loosely.
Hmm.
And they
Hmm.
mean, and you talk about this, like expectations instead of boundaries. You talk so much, and so many people wrote in with questions about the feelings of guilt. And I had people saying to me, normalizing the feeling of guilt when setting boundaries has made me feel much freer. And it, I think, has had a profound effect on people who have gotten in touch with me. How you talk about how there are no there are no boundaries without guilt.
Hmm.
Do you think guilt is what makes setting boundaries so hard, or what is the hardest thing for most people about setting boundaries?
Well, I have some good news. You will not die from feeling guilty. That's the first piece of good news.
Yes.
The second piece of good news is I think feeling guilty is a good consciousness indicator, right? Like,
Yeah.
you care about people. It shows a bit of compassion. It shows that I can't remember the character who didn't have a heart, but on the Wizard of Oz, who didn't have the heart? Was that the lion? Maybe
It
the
might be.
lion.
I don't know. I'm
You
sure
have a
someone can
heart.
chime in.
You have a
Yeah.
heart. You care about people. A lot of things are firing in there. Those are good things. So guilt is just information. It's like, I really care about this person. I really care about this situation. I can feel it and perceive. Thank you, Tim. I need to go back and watch The Wizard of Oz. That's what I learned today.
Yeah.
I need to watch. But yeah, you are not the Tin Man.
Yeah.
You actually have a heart in there and you care about people, and that's a good thing, because it's more of an issue if you do all these things and you don't care. When people are like, I just tell people whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, that is scary. Versus I feel a bit of a way about saying this thing to my mom, to my coworker, to my sister, my friend, my neighbor, my so and so. Having some sort of consciousness about that is a positive thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist and very much am preaching all the time to people that emotions are information, and our goal is not to eradicate the
Mm-hmm.
emotions because they indicate that something's important, that we care.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I one of the things I loved the most about the book is how clearly you delineated like the different types of boundaries, right? I had never taken the time to think through how vast different boundaries can be. And I've been particularly thinking about the ways that I can be more mindful with my time boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
especially work wise. You say in the book that time boundaries are the most common types of boundaries that people need to set. Why do you think that is?
I think time boundaries are the most common boundaries we need to set with ourselves. And two, like I mentioned with my friend who was giving me her time boundary, that I am not always available. There are times when I am available and times when I'm not. I assume, oh, if I call a person, there is a protocol, like they have to call back within an hour. That was based on how I was groomed around having a cell phone. If I had if my dad called and I didn't answer the phone, he's like, why didn't you answer the phone? So I took that behavior onto other people. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean that it was the appropriate boundary for everyone. It was just something that I was living. And that situation helped me see, oh, actually, people get to choose how they use their cell phones. People get to choose what they do when they get off work. People get to choose if they want to plan a vacation for all their friends. Like, a lot of these things are choices, and sometimes we forget that we have a choice. When I talk to a client who's like, "Oh my gosh, I hate my job and I have to go," I'm like, "Well, you have a choice." I'm going to tell you, the choice here is not good. It sounds like you're going to lose your Netflix and your mortgage, but
right.
you have a choice. Like,
Yeah,
you could go live with your parents, or you could figure out a way to stay at this job until you get another one, or you could go to this job. There's so many choices, but we only see one way. And with our boundaries, sometimes we think there's only one way to do this thing. It's right or it's wrong. When in actuality, there's a lot of gray in the
yeah.
world.
A lot of black and white thinking. And I also think that a lot of people assume that the boundaries they want,
Mhm.
the boundaries that they set for themselves, are what other people want as well. And so, I
Yes.
think that goes in with the example with your friend in calling that,
Hmm.
you maybe at that time felt like if someone called you, you were going to call back. And so you kind of afflicted those same expectations onto her. And I think sometimes it's only natural, but we do a disservice to other people by assuming that they want the same
Yes.
boundaries as we do.
Yes. I am the same way with party invites. I've had to loosen up over the years because I'm like, I invited them and they didn't respond. Who does that? And it's like a lot of people, girl, a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people don't respond. And you have some people who will tell you the day of, like, oh, I forgot to send that thing. And did I tell you I was coming? It's like, oh my gosh. But the beauty of that is when you learn your people, you learn who is the last minute person, who is the person who's going to let you know right away. That behavior may not ruin your friendship because now you can have an expectation of this person that matches what
Yeah.
they have shown you in the past.
Right. Right. Um, one thing, and I want to jump into the questions that people wrote into about, but one thing that I was thinking about quite a bit while reading the book is you talk a lot about the importance of being assertive.
Mhm.
And I think that in a lot of situations, when women are assertive, they may be accused of being aggressive. And you very clearly delineate between what is aggressive and what is assertive. But do you have recommendations? When talking to so many people about this, this often comes up, whether it be clients or friends, for women in male dominated environments. Are there
Mhm.
ways that they can be assertive without running the risk of being accused of being aggressive?
I don't think so because then we would get into a lot of trying to control the perception of who we are
Yeah.
in the eyes of other people. And that is work that is not meant for us to
Yeah.
do. There are some people based on how they were raised, how women speak up, their culture, all sorts of things where if a woman says anything, it's aggressive. So I think it's important to make sure you have some checks and balances in place. Sometimes that's, going over what you'll say with a mentor or going over what you'll say with your immediate team before you take it to a superior. But if everybody's like, no, I think, oh, have you thought about saying it this way? Or, oh, no, that sounds appropriate. I would say, ding, 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 go ahead and do it. And if someone's like, oh my gosh, you were aggressive, I think it's safe to say that they just didn't like hearing what you said and it was sanctioned as appropriate. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we are saying the appropriate thing, and because of how the person wants, women are aggressive or whatever, um, they may still say, even if you said it appropriately, that that was too much for them. So that's tough to sort of monitor with other people, and I do think it is to our benefit to speak up no matter what the person's perception of that situation might be.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about not trying to mind read and predict what the person's going to think and also not trying to control it because that isn't something that's in our control. And I think that's also something that's so important with boundaries, that boundaries are not about controlling the other person. They're about controlling the limits we set with that other person, in situations like this or other situations.
Yeah, and in work environments, I know for folks that I work with, women in particular, I'm constantly encouraging them to speak up because what I've noticed is we'll deal with stuff for a very long time and we'll get to the point where it's like, oh, I've been trying to tell you this. You're not saying in a way where a person would hear you.
Yeah.
When someone offers you an opportunity and it doesn't work for you, you can say that. Be
Yeah.
risky in how you respond to things. I'm still surprised at the amount of women who don't ask for raises or who don't negotiate salaries and these sorts of things that I've seen men do it and they sometimes don't deserve it. But the women, it's like, no, I'll take what you said. I'm like, girl, ask for more. I have more.
Yeah.
So, I think that assertiveness really runs deep in what could be possible for us. And we have to give ourselves the power and the ability to do that. And sometimes that's saying, I'm not going to settle for this. This is what I deserve in this environment.
Yeah. And you talk in the book about, you briefly mentioned that there are sometimes, particularly in work environments, in which speaking up or setting a boundary might put someone at risk of being fired.
Mhm. Mhm.
How how do you recommend that people navigate those situations? Do they just identify that those probably aren't healthy work situations and try to
Mm-hmm.
exit it,
Mm-hmm.
and try to set that boundary? Or how do you navigate, trying to do what feels safe versus setting the boundary?
Well, I am a firm believer in making sure that you are keeping documentation of things and also that you are speaking to the human resource department, that there are emails that can track what is being said, because there needs to be some proof that things are actually happening, not hearsay. So when you notice you have a problem with a person, creating a paper trail, talking to human resources about it is a protection. And sometimes we don't take those channels because it's like, well, I don't want to be a tattletale. Be a tattletale more often, because that is what can change a culture in a place. I love the show The Office, and whenever Michael Scott would have like a HR issue, he would try to jump in as HR. And Toby would be like, "You cannot say that. Like, you're making this situation that's actually more racist than the thing we were. You're being more
Yeah.
sexist than you're supposed to
Yeah.
be." So I think sometimes we feel like, "Oh, I'm going to talk to this person directly," but we're talking to people who may not be willing to change or who can't even impact in changing that environment. So sometimes talking to HR, talking to their manager, keeping a paper trail, perhaps consulting some legal advising could be helpful as well. But what we don't want to do is remain silent because we want to stay in a culture that is possibly not good for us and not good for other people.
Yeah. And I see someone wrote in saying, what do you do if someone brings something to HR about an issue that hasn't even happened?
Okay, well, we cannot work on figurative
Right.
scenarios, right? So I think if somebody is taking something to HR that has not happened, I wonder if it's possible for HR to refer that person to maybe their EAP, where they can get some services to work through whatever potential issue they think they're going to have, because I sense a little bit of anxiety in that. And so if it hasn't happened, there's nothing for us to address. It's not a workplace issue, or it's not one yet.
Moving away from work boundaries,
Mhm.
someone had written in through the book club saying, for people who come from enmeshed families, how do we know what our values are versus how do we know what are values that have been inflicted on us through boundary violations?
That takes some time to figure out who you are outside of your family. I remember when I moved on my own, I had grown up where my mom kept a lot of condiments in the cabinet. So the mustard, the ketchup, they were
Mhm.
always in the cabinet. And I realized one day, I really like cold ketchup on hot fries. And so, I don't know, maybe I was at a restaurant, the ketchup was cold, but I just discovered that about myself. So at my house, I keep the ketchup and the mustard in a refrigerator. Like, that's my preference. So it could be things as small as that. Just noticing what you actually like about things, how you actually like to do things, because sometimes it's just muscle memory. We'll keep making the spaghetti the same way, doing all the same things, all the same
Yeah.
holidays the same way. And maybe we don't want to spend every Thanksgiving with our family, and we actually want to lay in the bed and take it as a day off. But you have to be willing to explore something different and deal with, because family, oh, why you didn't want to come over? Because it's my day off and I actually have to go back to work on Friday. Or I want to take a long weekend, or I don't want to travel. A lot of the coming out of enmeshment is going to have to be around figuring out who you are outside of what everybody tried to make you.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think you do such a good job of identifying that enmeshment is not always clear and is not always like it's a negative term. But I
Mhm.
think that family backgrounds don't always have to feel negative to people in order for them to be enmeshed families. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
that you very clearly can help people through the book recognize how enmeshment might be impacting them and their boundaries.
I think enmeshment is only enmeshment when it's problematic.
Right.
Codependency is only codependency when it's problematic.
Yeah.
So if it's not a problem for the person, are you actually enmeshed? But what happens is you have people who start to notice like, oh, I don't want to do this thing, or actually I just started dating someone and I don't want to continue in this way with my family, or I've had a kid, or I've moved away and I've experienced different things, or I have a new friendship and I'm noticing this with their family. So a person starts to see this is a problem, and this is when the term typically comes up. I can't go into a situation where, you and your family get together 5 days a week, you sing songs together, you seem very happy. Who am I to go into that situation and say, oh, you all are enmeshed?
Right.
No, it seems like everybody is happy here. Now, if there's one person who says, I don't want to dress like them anymore, I only want to see them once a week, and I'm not singing these songs. That's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
It's not when everybody is in it and they actually like it. The problem is when people start to pull away from it, and it's like, oh, okay, your family is enmeshed. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be, because there's levels to enmeshment. There's abuse that could be happening, and there's just also some people who spend a significant amount of time together and it's not a problem for anyone. So I would just call that very connected. So it's really hard to say like, because of a certain dynamic is automatically unhealthy. It depends.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that that's an important point. And I think there are cultural differences that, normalize certain family patterns. And I think one thing that I often have noticed with clients is people might not recognize something as enmeshment until they have a little bit of separation and try to set those boundaries, right? It's not always evident that the enmeshment is there in the moment.
Yeah.
Speaking about like cultural differences and boundaries, someone had written in and asked, I come from a collectivist culture where setting boundaries is received differently. Do you have advice on how to set boundaries while respecting cultural expectations?
When there's a lot of cultural norms or things that you feel, oh my gosh, I cannot change this, I always think like there was someone who shifted this culture, and that person was a person with boundaries. Like nothing in your culture is the exact same as 100, 200, 300 years ago, right? Like somebody's doing something a little bit different. And it was probably some trailblazer, some grandparent, auntie, or cousin who got a little bit of slack or a whole lot of slack. And it sounds like you're about to be that person. Because you now want this other thing. Somebody else did it, and here you are with another thing. So even when you come from a family that has, certain cultural norms, you can change what you want to move forward with in your life and still be a part of that culture. It doesn't mean that whatever the culture is, I have to do everything in it. There can be a little bit of a shifting. Maybe it's not significant, but it can be a little bit of a shifting. I remember a woman who was telling me she was Vietnamese, and she was saying how in her culture, parents are kind of like allowed to have keys to your house and just come over. Her mom just comes over and clean. But then she started dating, and she had to tell her mom, hey, you just can't come in my house because I might be, entertaining.
Yeah.
And so that was a really tough conversation because her mom had grown accustomed to, like, I come over when I want to, I could be here for a week, I can, do all these things. And so saying to her, like, hey, mommy, I understand that, this has been the thing, but I want to date people and I want to be able to date them in my home. So before you, turn your key in that lock, please give me a call when you're on your way so I could just say whether or not this is the time for you to visit.
Yeah. And I see someone wrote in saying, oh, where did it go? Someone wrote in saying cultural norms can equate to generational curses, especially as it relates to
Oh,
mindset. I think
oh
that,
yeah.
that
The
speaks very well.
family gang is the family gang can sometimes be more brutal than the Crips, the Bloods, and anything else, right? Because it'll, they really get you in that gang, and it's like they won't let you leave. It's a lot of, especially when it's toxic, they will convince you that the wildest things are normal. I think of one of my favorite Adam Sandler movies, which is The Water Boy, and how his mother convinced him of all these very ridiculous things. And sometimes in unhealthy families, that's what happens. Nobody loves you but us, but the way that they're loving you is abusive.
Right.
So then you're like, oh my gosh, like I have to allow them to abuse me. So it's a very difficult situation to be in, and to even say that this is a norm. It's like, yes, this is the norm, but it's not normal,
Right.
right? This is not normal, it's not healthy. So it can be a cultural norm within your family to do certain things and still be unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's very, very important to remember. What signs can people recognize early on before they get to a place of resentment or disappointment or anxiety to indicate that a situation or a relationship needs boundaries?
Mm. Listening to ourselves. Listening to ourselves. I think we know when something is wrong. We know when we want to have a conversation. How do we know? We're talking about it a lot with other people. We're thinking about it. We're avoiding people. We're starting to feel anxiety about having to be with a person. We're withdrawing from them. There are certain indicators that I am having a problem in this relationship or in this situation. What is it, and how can I communicate that? Is there anything I need to communicate? Or maybe it's a shift for me. I just posted a video right before we came on about privacy, because sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, my mother-in-law, she talks about me all the time. She tells my business. And I say, well, who told her about that? Well, I told her and she shouldn't tell anybody. Well, sometimes we have to withhold information from people who share it and we don't want them to. And that's really tough, because how do I know this is a problem for me? I'm frustrated. I'm upset. I'm mad at my mother-in-law. So that is how you know that you need a boundary. Something is happening within your body, within your spirit, energetically in that relationship. And it is a key indicator that there is something different that needs to be done. And most often it needs to be done now, because if we don't do it as soon as we notice it, the resentment can really eat at us and it can destroy a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you speak to this in the book, but it's really important to be mindful of not just waiting and expecting something to
Mhm.
change, right? Not just seeing instances as one-offs and letting them accumulate and not recognizing it as a general pattern, right? That listening to our intuition, listening to how we feel, and not discounting the emotions that we feel or telling ourselves, oh, I'm overreacting. Oh, this person will change. Oh, I need to get over this. Because I think when we're doing that, we're not only doing a disservice to ourselves, but we're also doing it to the other person.
As you use the term overreacting, that made me think that when people typically overreact, they have dealt with too much.
Yeah.
It's not it's not that their feelings are not warranted, it's that they have let them go on for so long that now
Yeah.
I am aggressive in how I express this thing. And
Yeah.
sometimes we do that when we first learn about boundaries. It's like, I'm giving everybody boundaries, my mom, my dad, at work, my kids. And it's like, too much, too fast, slow down,
Yeah.
right? Like, baby steps. You went from tolerating all types of stuff and having an open schedule with everybody, and now you want every boundary under the sun. That might be a little aggressive. We have to start small and build on things. So sometimes I think we get so excited to have new information, to be able to explore what we know in a different way, that we might overreact. We might be aggressive, but it really helps when we can notice things and respond to it sooner.
Yeah. I think that's very true. And I think that when we talk about aggression with boundaries, that I would also extend that toward aggressive talk toward ourselves, right?
Mhm.
When we find ourselves being hypercritical of ourselves, or telling ourselves that our feelings don't matter, that we need to be stronger, we need to be braver, whatever that internalized language is. It's important to be introspective and not just think of the aggression towards others, but also what we might turn toward ourselves.
Yes.
And I see that someone wrote in, talking about having difficulty with an in-law, and I recommend reading that portion of the book because you do such a great job of, highlighting how to handle tension with in-laws. I'm mindful of time. I want to provide you with the opportunity to share with everyone listening, either now or in the recording, whose lives you have undoubtedly changed with your wonderful book,
Mhm.
where else they can consume your wisdom and content.
Yes. I will say, for the person with the mother-in-law issue, Set Boundaries, Find Peace is a great resource. And also my book, Drama Free, which is about families. There is certainly more information in that book about in-laws, because that is a very unique situation that I wanted to give a lot of information toward, because family is one of the hardest areas where we set our boundaries. It's a very difficult place, whether it's your in laws or your biological family, adopted family. It is a tough community to be firm with. So please check out Drama Free. As for me, um, you can find me here on Instagram, and also please check out my website for any updates. I'm also on Threads and Facebook and all the things as Nedra Tawwab. And we talked about two books. So I mentioned Drama Free and Set Boundaries, Find Peace. But there are others. Please visit my website, check them out. If you are open to it, I love for myself workbooks, because sometimes we're not going to go to therapy, or even if we're in therapy, we just need some deeper work. I have two workbooks, one for Set Boundaries, Find Peace, and one for Drama Free, where we can just practice some of this stuff we've been reading about, because often it's wonderful to read a book, but it's even better when we can practice it and make it a real thing in our lives.
Well, thank you again, for writing the book, for helping people recognize the boundaries they need to set or the boundaries they need to respect. One final question that I ask each of our book club speakers is there a book you've read recently that you highly recommend that others read?
The book that I've read recently that I would recommend others read. Oh my gosh, my copy isn't up here. The Tale.
Okay.
Um, yes. So The Tale, it is a red book by Amy. I blurbed the book, but it's also very good because often when we have trauma, some of us have repressed memories, and this book really pulls that scenario out and how it's uncovered and how she dives deeper into doing the work to work through that trauma. So The Tale, I've been in a memoir sort of phase, so I am rereading Viola Davis's book. I just finished Whoopi's book. So I'm deep in memoir. So yeah, those are the three that I've been enjoying lately.
Well, thank you again for everything and for coming to speak to the book club, for being our March book club speaker with Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And thank you to everyone for joining. We'll be announcing next month's book very soon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful
Bye.
night.
Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.